GearNetwork.com.
The following is a presentation of the Gear Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I believe it's a big challenge for our building to keep things in perspective and to, if we're going to get addicted to anything, let's get addicted to the process.
And with that, we welcome you to Trust the Podcast, powered by Better Live Than Dead and the Gear Radio Network. This is episode 120. 120. I didn't think my co-host would get it. John's not here today because John's birthday is this Monday. So we're fourth wall breaking down. It's Saturday morning. USA is playing the Netherlands. We're almost at halftime. It's just going to get real windy out. So hopefully we don't lose power during the podcast either, because that would be not great. But I am Ryan Wolfe at Wolfe BLTD. My co-host this week is Brayton at Brayton J. Wilson on Twitter. Brayton, buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm you're waiting for the wind to come. I've got the rain right now, and I mean, some soccer on this morning, which is out of the ordinary for me. But hey, we're doing all right.
You're all wet. I'm waiting for the blow-in, and somewhere John is listening to the podcast, giggling like a 12-year-old.
Oh, and I'm just watching as the Netherlands score again.
You can hear us on BetterLiveThanDead.com, GearNetwork.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Words are hard. As well, to stay up to date on the latest podcast. Brayton, Buffalo absolutely sucked the life out of the New England Patriots on Thursday Night Football on their way to a 24-10 victory. The fifth consecutive Thursday game victory for the Buffalo Bills. Hey, the Buffalo Bills now, this is a fun stat, are 5-0 on Thursday with Josh Allen at quarterback. Buffalo also the first team in NFL history to win 3 Thursday games in a season. They're also the first team to win at New England by double digits in 3 straight seasons, which says a lot, speaking to the fact that Bill Belichick normally doesn't lose often to the same teams, let alone by double digits, let alone consecutive seasons. But also Buffalo moves to 9-3, which is the 11th time in franchise history the team has been 9-3 or better through 12 games. So honestly, I mean, I know very often I'm doom and gloom on the podcast because I try to keep it real, and John, tells me to shut up. But Brayton, things are really looking up for the Buffalo Bills, especially after this big victory on Thursday night.
Well, it's nice to get back on the winning side of things, especially after a pair of disappointing losses. I mean, obviously the Jets loss was one that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. But then when the Vikings came to town a few weeks back, at the time they were 7-1, and they were a really, really good team. And that was just a really good contest that just came down to overtime. And unfortunately for the Bills, they came out on the losing side of it after having a nice lead as well. But I mean, to bounce back the way they did, they battled the elements and with, the Cleveland situation, had to go play in Detroit and win. And then, 4 days later, they go back to Detroit on Thanksgiving and come away with a much closer win than I think a lot of people had anticipated against the Lions. And then this week, they get a full week of rest. They get a full week to kind of recuperate. They do get a good number of bodies back. They did lose Deion Dawkins and Von Miller, though. But in the end, they definitely looked like the better team against the Patriots squad from start to finish. They looked like the better of the two teams. It looked like the Patriots obviously are still not even in the same realm or in the same category as the Bills anymore. So especially this win for the Bills, just nice to get back and a nice streak now. You've won 3 in a row, and you come back home after some 3 hard-earned wins, and you've got a couple of really big battles coming up in the division. So, to get 3 straight games in the division with 1 win right off the bat, that's a good start.
Especially seeing as this is the first win the Buffalo Bills have had against the AFC East all season. Crazy to think that.
Right. Yeah.
It's December 3rd, and we're talking about the Bills' first win in the AFC East, but we're also talking about the Bills being 9-3, which is, you would think that if they were not winning in their division, they would not be good otherwise, because before the season, we figured the division would not be as good as it's been, and it's one of the best AFC Easts we've seen potentially ever. But for the Bills,
but another thing too, just like, why are we having these divisional games so late in the season? Why not sprinkle in a couple more earlier?
It really feels like with baseball where they'll have like the Red Sox, for instance, just because obviously I'm a Red Sox fan, so I pay attention more to it. Where you'll have like they won't play the Yankees in a series till like June, and then September is just Tampa Bay, Baltimore, Toronto, and New York. Those are your only opponents, which like cool, but I don't know. It's just weird to me.
Yeah, no, and I mean, they've done it for the past few years where like week 18, they try to, for the last week, whatever it is, they try to have it all be divisional matchups. And it's just like, yeah, that's kind of cool and all. I get it. I understand. But
You got to sprinkle them in a little better.
Right. Sprinkle it all around a little bit more, have a little variety. But, the Bills in their final 3 games, it's the Bears, then the Bengals, and then you play the Patriots again. But, I mean, to have 3 straight divisional games, just I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, and before we get to talking about the game real quick, just looking at the schedule, it's kind of good for the Bills to fall into this stretch at the right time because they had their win over Kansas City, big win over Kansas City. They have their bye week. They come back against Green Bay. They look kind of flat, but they win. They lose to New York. Josh Allen hurts his elbow, but the Bills look flat overall. They almost beat Minnesota. They really should have beat Minnesota, but they just couldn't hold on, as we talked about. But then they kind of go through a hellacious 3 weeks where they have a Sunday, they're in Detroit. Then they're in Detroit the next Thursday. Then the Thursday after, they're in New England. So it's like they're going all over the place. They can't just sit down and just kind of relax for a minute. But now they don't play till December 11th. They take on the New York Jets. We'll talk about that later in the podcast. But then they take on Miami December 18th at home. So for the next 2.5 weeks, they don't have to worry about going anywhere. They don't have to worry about leaving their house. Everything is just kind of calm, cool, collected for the biggest stretch of the season, which they're going to roll into on a 3-game win streak, which again, we'll talk about here in a moment. But it's good to see the Buffalo Bills, and this will bring us to our 3 big things here. It's good to see the Buffalo Bills kind of hitting their stride again, playing a little different football, but hitting their stride. Now, Brayton, before we jump in, as always, our 3 big things are brought to you by puckluck.com, your one-stop resource for all of your National Hockey League sports betting action. Puckluck provides win percentages and score projections for each and every National Hockey League game to tilt the ice in your favor. Not sure what to bet or just in a rut? Puckluck also provides expert picks to get the puck bouncing your way. Please note, puckluck.com, no way affiliated with the National Hockey League. Its teams with the NHLPA. Puckluck.com provides data related to gambling and cannot guarantee the success of any suggested or related wagers. As always, please gamble responsibly. Now, running down the offensive stats, our first of the 3 big things here today, Josh Allen, 22 for 33, 223 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and 8 rushes for 20 yards. Allen did lose a fumble on a strip sack, but let's be honest, Brayton, judging by the replays, Josh Allen had little chance on that strip sack. David Quessenberry had injured he re-injured his ankle the first drive of the game and really kind of turned into just a bit of a turnstile at left tackle. In New England defender Josh Uche, who had both sacks on Thursday night, grabbed Josh Allen's arms from behind and tossed him to the turf. So that's just there's no good or bad about it. That's good execution by the Patriots. You just chalked it up as a loss as the Bills and move on to the next drive because that was you got Josh Allen. The best way to get the ball out of his hands is to pull his arms back and make him drop the ball. Then he can't pick it up. Give yourself the better chance to recover it, which they did. And hey, like I said, good technique on the Patriots. You chalk that one up as a loss, you move forward. But Josh Allen did do some good things as well. Always, Brayton. It always feels like there's some statistics that Josh Allen is the first of, or breaking a record, or tying a record. On Thursday night, Allen became the first player in NFL history with 3 seasons of 25 passing touchdowns and at least 5 rushing touchdowns. His 25th passing touchdown of the season ties Allen for 5th most by a Bill in the season. As you may recall, Allen owns the single season record with 37 passing touchdowns in 2020. Also, with his 106.0 passer rating, Allen recorded his 23rd game of his career with a minimum of 20 attempts with a 100-plus passer rating, which is the 3rd most all-time in Bills history. Only Joe Ferguson with 25 and Jim Kelly with 40 have recorded more. And here's a good stat as well. Buffalo is 22-1 all-time when Allen posts a 100-plus rating, and they are 6-0 this season. So, shockingly, Brayton, when the franchise quarterback plays well, the Bills tend to win.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the offense rolls through Josh Allen. The whole team rolls through Josh Allen, and it's kind of been that way for the past 3, 4, even 5 years when he first took over and started really kind of showing what he can bring to the Bills and to the NFL. Obviously there were a couple of plays against the Patriots where maybe he tried to be a little hero ball-y, trying to fit a ball in where he probably shouldn't have, and maybe he had a couple of passes that could have been picked off. But I mean, for a majority of that game, I'd say probably about 95% of the game, he was just dialed in. He was playing good, smart football, making precise throws, looking like that elbow was really not much of a factor for him anymore. But not only that, but I think the thing that, that I was very critical about Allen, especially in the game against Detroit, with that elbow injury, he was still trying to do maybe a little too much to rely on his arm when, he was not mechanically sound. He was, trying to throw off balance or not setting his feet right, trying to make throws, and he was off. He missed some throws, and it was quite obvious. It looked like this week he definitely tried to have a little bit more of a sense of awareness to get his feet set, to get himself in a good position, to make a strong throw, to make an accurate throw. And it all comes down to just the overall way he's throwing the football, the footwork, the arm strength, just everything kind of being in sync. And it seemed like, especially against the Patriots this week, he was in sync with his arm, his footwork, his footing, his balance. Everything seemed like it was going pretty well. A couple instances, maybe it was off and it showed. But again, like I said, 95% of the time he was on cue, he was on point, and it showed. And he was clearly a factor for the Bills in that game. And, when you get Josh Allen playing like that, you get him at that level, playing at the confidence that he has, it's very tough for the opposing team to be able to defend that and make good stops and try and win football games that way. And when Allen plays that way, it only is going to benefit the Bills and give them that much more of a chance to win.
And I want to kind of bounce things around here because it makes more sense to talk about this now. But the game plan for the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night seemed to be a lot better, a lot more fluid, a lot wiser in the red zone. Where, we did have that one Josh Allen play where you see the picture going around the internet, and one of my friends said, I dare you to ask somebody who didn't watch this game or doesn't watch sports to tell me what they think happened here. And it's Josh Allen about to step out of bounds and Gabe Davis in the end zone double covered, triple covered, whatever the situation was. And you just think to yourself, like, holy crap. And the stats prove it too. Next Gen Stats points out, this was provided by the Buffalo Bills official social media account, Josh Allen was 0.3 yards from the sideline on his 8-yard touchdown pass to Gabe Davis, the second closest to the sideline on a completion in the Next Gen Stats era. So literally was in a phone booth and was able to make it work. That was a great play. You obviously don't want to see that all the time, but going back to my original point here, Brayton, the Bills used the run effectively to smother the Patriots. They outpossessed the New England Patriots 38-08 to 21-52. Buffalo had 72 total plays to New England's 51. Buffalo also had a 15-play, 94-yard drive, which lasted 8 minutes, 55 seconds, which is the longest touchdown drive time-wise since Buffalo used 10 minutes on a touchdown drive at the Seattle Seahawks on November 7th, 2016. The one thing to me, you see James Cook. He had a career-high 105 yards of total offense, 14 rushes for 64 yards, 6 receptions on 6 targets for 41 yards. He looked clean, crisp, and decisive on Thursday night. His continued development clearly would add a much-needed wrinkle to this Bills offense. He also played a season-high 32 of 75 snaps, which is 43% of the offensive snaps on Thursday. Running back Devin Singletary had 13 carries for 51 yards with 1 touchdown. He had no catches, but did have 2 targets. A rushing touchdown on Thursday marked Singletary's 4th rushing touchdown in the last 4 games. His usage was down, though, from an average of 71.36 snaps on average in the first 11 games to 44% of the snaps played on Thursday. He played 33 of 75 offensive snaps. So him and James Cook played about the same amount of offensive snaps, which is, it seems to work. It's Buffalo's 17th consecutive game with 100-plus total rushing yards, the second longest streak in team history. The franchise record, 37 straight games from 1973 to 1976. But Brayton, the point I'm trying to make here, and I think it's the biggest compliment you can give the Buffalo Bills, and I don't remember who said it, and I do apologize because it's a very good point, very simple point. On Thursday night, the Buffalo Bills played a New England Patriots style game against the New England Patriots and essentially beat them at their own game. And even though the score wasn't huge, it was very satisfying to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, it almost looked like at times the Bills were just trying to toy with the Patriots, especially when they were just that drive in the third quarter into the fourth quarter. It was a 15-play drive that extended, I think it was like 80-plus yards, just maybe even 90-plus yards. I can't even remember off the top of my head. But just that entire drive, you knew that that was one of the things that they pulled it right out of Bill Belichick's playbook, where they're just toying with the Patriots. They're trying to kind of beat them at their own game. And you knew at that point after that drive, the game was over. The Patriots had no way of stopping the Bills on that drive. They were mixing in a great, they had a great mix of the run game in with the passing game. And at a few times, it definitely was just like, this is stuff that we've seen from the Patriots in the past, and now the Bills are utilizing it. And it's just fun to see. It's fun to see, the run game finally starting to come alive outside of just Josh Allen. James Cook, definitely, that maybe was kind of his coming out party for his career. The one where, not only was he very effective on the ground, but in the pass game as well. And who knows how they look to utilize him as the year goes on. I mean, they could certainly look to him even more going forward to kind of being, maybe the number one type of guy in the weapon in the backfield, with Devin Singletary being sprinkled in an even amount. And then, another interesting aspect was Nyheim Hines was a guy that was oftentimes kind of playing in the slot and going in motion and being a guy that they tried to use as a decoy. And a couple of times they tried to hand it off and it didn't turn out great, but obviously he's not a running back that is a running style of running back. He's a guy that's going to go out and try and make a play through the air. So, the Bills offense, they definitely were able to get things going against the Patriots. And yes, absolutely, it was satisfying to see the way they were able to move the ball, how efficient they were, and the way that they were able to continue to keep the ball and keep it out of the Patriots' hands. And even when the Patriots had it in their hands, the defense played really well.
Absolutely. And it was mind blowing to see. I mean, I feel bad because I feel like Nyheim Hines is just waiting for an opportunity. He did play a season high in amount of snaps, which I thought I put down here, but I did not. But he seems to be getting more opportunities, although it seems like every time he touched the ball on Thursday night, it was a negative play, which, it happens. But either way, just keeping everybody fresh, keeping everybody running in the right direction seems to be working out well for this Buffalo Bills offense. And wide receiver Gabe Davis, 2 receptions on 7 targets, which is not a great percentage, but 2 receptions on 7 targets for 15 yards and a touchdown. He becomes the second Bill to record 6+ touchdown receptions in each of his first 3 seasons. Lee Evans did the same in 2004 through 2006. He does continue to struggle converting opportunities into catches, but we'll see how that develops. Also, Stephon Diggs, 7 receptions on 9 targets for 92 yards and 1 touchdown. He has 1,202 receiving yards in the first 12 games, which breaks the franchise record for most receiving yards in a team's first 12 games, set by Eric Moulds in 2000, who had 1,121 yards. He's also the first player in franchise history to record multiple seasons with 10-plus receiving touchdowns, which he also recorded 10 in 2021. Trails Bill Brooks, who had 11 receiving touchdowns in 1995 for the most receiving touchdowns in franchise history. He's the 6th Bill to have 2+ seasons with 10+ total touchdowns. Thurman Thomas did it 4 times, Joe Cribbs 3 times. Cookie Gilchrist, O.J. Simpson, and Travis Henry did it twice each. Also, Diggs recorded his 91st catch of the season on the final reception of the night, which breaks the franchise record for most catches in the first 12 games, which Diggs set last season at 90 catches. So Stephon Diggs continues to be impressive, and it's hard to deny him.
It's absolutely hard to deny Stephon Diggs is just being the number one weapon for Josh Allen. I mean, even when it was so funny because I think it was on that long drive in the third into the fourth quarter where even on a third down when Diggs was kind of still running his route, Josh Allen just trusted him to be able to have just enough time to be able to turn and be able to make a catch on the go. And it was just split second. Just he turns around, next thing you know, ball's kind of like in his shoulder, and he's making the catch against his shoulder with his one arm. And just it doesn't matter how Josh Allen tries to get the ball to Stephon Diggs. It always seems like they find a way to connect and they find a way to move the ball down the field and be such an effective offense that way. And it's nice to see these other pieces get sprinkled in, but it's almost a surefire thing now where it's like you need a big play. It's Josh Allen, go find Stephon Diggs one way or another, and it doesn't even matter if Diggs is being double covered or even in some cases triple covered, sometimes he finds a way to get open and make a play. I mean, you saw it against the Lions where the Bills needed to get the field goal range, and that was the very first target Josh Allen was going to was Stephon Diggs. And I think everybody knew it was that, hey, go find Diggs down the field. And I think there were 2 Lions in the vicinity right around with him, and he beat those guys and gave the Bills that huge conversion to set themselves up in the field goal range to win the game. So obviously, you know, when we see plays like this, it's not surprising anymore. It's not surprising to see Josh Allen turn to Stephon Diggs to make a big play like that. It's not surprising to see Stephon Diggs get open as he has been doing. So, you know, obviously for the Bills going forward, you just continue to pray, like, you know, hey, stay healthy, stay active, stay targeting each other, stay confident. And if they continue to do that, it's going to be very hard to be able to stop a Josh Allen and a Stephon Diggs. And even when Gabe Davis or Dawson Knox or Isaiah McKenzie get confidence in getting targets like that, it's hard to stop them as well, especially when your quarterback is on top of his game and getting the ball where it needs to be.
And now we'll move on to our second of the 3 big things here, wrapping up the defense. And Brayton, last week I said to John, you know, you can't count on this Buffalo Bills defense anymore because they're so beat up. It's nothing that they've done wrong. They just can't stay healthy. That's not their fault either because you can't predict injuries. So what did the Bills do, Brayton, on Thursday? They came out and they were their very own Buffalo Bills self on defense. Defensive end AJ Epinesa had, 2 total tackles, 2 solo, one sack, 2 tackles for loss in the quarterback hit. He has 4.5 sacks this season, which are a career high, and ranked 3rd among Buffalo Bills defenders. They also held New England to 60 rushing yards on 14 carries and held New England to 3 for 12 on 3rd down. So again, Brayton, I feel kind of like an idiot because I was like, you know, you can't trust him. You just got to let him get you a drive or 2. And then they come out and do this on Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
you still can't count on them because they're so hurt, but it seems as if as they get healthier. The one thing I did notice is that even without Von Miller on the field, Greg Rousseau is still a game breaker. AJ Epinesa coming back a little, coming up with it, but Greg Rousseau has made a jump, and it is very clear when he's on the field and when he's not on the field.
Oh, 100%. I mean, certainly that defensive line, even without Von Miller against the Patriots, seemed like they were still able to get enough pressure onto Mac Jones. They were able to do enough to disrupt the Patriots throughout the entirety of the game. And, you know, not only that, but, you know, you mentioned Greg Rousseau. I think another name that all of a sudden almost seems like has come back to life, especially in his second tenure with the Bills, is Shaq Lawson. Lawson was, especially on the one drive, was a monster. He had one, I think it was a quarterback hit and then a sack that almost resulted in a safety. But I mean, he was finding ways to get to the backfield. He was finding ways to make an impact for this Bills defense without the presence of Von Miller on that defensive line. So, you know, they came up in the clutch. They were able to show that, hey, you know, it's not just Von Miller that's an impact here, or that can be an impact. We certainly have enough pieces on this defensive line that can make a difference and be an impact to really disrupt the opposition's chances on offense. So the thing about it now is that they're just going to have to show that they can continue to do this game in and game out, even with Von Miller. You got the Jets next week. You got a very good deep offense from the Dolphins the next week after that. And then in the following week, you've got the Bears, who, if Justin Fields is playing, certainly is a factor that way too. And you'll have to bring up pressure on him without trying to get him to break free and get off for a big giant game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this unit responds without the likes of Von Miller going forward for at least the next 3 games. But against the Patriots on Thursday, they did really well.
And looking at the defense still, I mean, it was you had a guy like Xavier Rhodes. He stepped up. He played 87% of the snaps on Thursday. His second game of the season with the Buffalo Bills, but it seems like he is taking on a very big role. We'll talk about Tre'Davious White here in a minute, but again, you see a guy like this is the thing for me that's really good news about the return of Tre'Davious White and having the arrival of Xavier Rhodes on the roster. A guy like Dane Jackson, who has played his ass off. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I don't think he's a terrible player, but in my humble opinion, I don't think a guy like Dane Jackson should be playing 100% of the snaps, 95% of the snaps. And then the last 3 games before New England, he played 100% of the snaps. On Thursday, only 52% of the snaps. But again, I understand he stepped up because guys were very hurt and they were rail thin on defense. The one interesting thing I'm interested to see is Kyer Elam was apparently healthy, but was a scratch on Thursday. Not sure why. We'll find out more, I would presume, because the Bills aren't back until Monday. So they played Thursday, and then Sean McDermott said after the game in his post-game remarks in the locker room that everyone's off till Monday, so they get kind of a mini bye week, which is great for them. But again, to look at the defensive snap counts, it's very impressive. I mean, you've got a guy like Ed Oliver who, again, game breaker, playing 72% of the snaps. Greg Rousseau, 63% of the snaps. Shaq Lawson, 61% of the snaps. So they're still able to shift guys in and out and still be effective. We're getting back to that point of no matter who's coming at you, you're going to have a bad time with this Buffalo Bills defense. Now, granted, like I said, you can't rely on them to do this every single week, but it's good to have it. I was actually just baffled because I'm looking here right now that last week AJ Klein played 100% of the snaps. This week against New England, he didn't play a snap at all. So that's kind of depth you want, I guess. It's interesting. But moving over to our third of the 3 big things here, deeper into the win. First off, kicker Tyler Bass, prior to Thursday's game, was named the AFC Special Teams Player of the Month for November. He converted 12 of 13 field goal attempts in November, scored a conference best 44 points in the month. His 12 field goals made led all AFC kickers. It's his second career Player of the Month award for Bass, which makes him the first Bills special teamer since Brian Moorman to earn the honor twice. Brian Moorman earned the honor 3 times with the Buffalo Bills. Speaking of players returning, Tre'Davious White continues his return to the Bills lineup. 2 games ago, he played 16 snaps, 23% of the defensive snaps. This week, he played 61% of the snaps. So he played 33 snaps. My guess based on this is that if all goes well, maybe against the Jets, we see him play a full game. I'm not 100% sure about that one, but it just seems to be trending in that direction. So that's great news for the Buffalo Bills defense. It really seems to me like Tre'Davious White, Xavier Rhodes, and Taron Johnson are going to be the 3 guys that they rely on a ton moving forward, which is, again, not a bad thing, but it will be something that we will continue to keep an eye on because obviously the Bills are much better with Tre'Davious White on the field than off the field. Another return here, Brayton, kind of a little bit of a surprise this week, the return of Smoke. Buffalo calling up wide receiver John Brown from the practice squad prior to Thursday night's game. A surprise that they signed him, not a surprise that he played on Thursday because, again, they needed bodies, and he knows. It's much like A.J. Klein when they claimed A.J. Klein and then played him in a game 100% of the snaps on defense.
Yeah,
you know these guys. You know what they can do. They know what you can do. They know what's needed of them and what's required of them. He only played 12 of 75 offensive snaps. That's 16% of the time, but good to have John Brown back, and I have to feel that the more time he spends with this offense, the more time he'll spend on the field.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice to see these veteran names coming back and a lot of familiar names, as you mentioned. But like with John Brown, especially, it'll be interesting to see how much more that they do call up his name from the practice squad to utilize him in games, just because, obviously with the assets that they have right now in the wide receiver group, you've got Stig, Davis, McKenzie, and Shakir. And then you also have Tanner Gentry as a name on the practice squad. And then you add John Brown onto the practice squad, who's familiar with the offense, maybe not necessarily familiar with Ken Dorsey in a way, just because Dorsey was the quarterback coach when Brown was last year. But, now that he's the offensive coordinator, and once John Brown gets up to speed, maybe eventually they decide, instead of him just being a practice squad guy that you call up on and elevate him from a game-to-game basis, you sign him to the active roster. And, that could obviously change if you have more injuries. But to have depth guys like him And, you get a guy like Xavier Rhodes, who was a veteran of this league for years. You had him on the practice squad for a while. Now he's on the active roster with Christian Benford on IR. Just having some of these names, these veteran names, is going to be key, especially for a squad like the Bills. If you want to make a run towards the Super Bowl this year and you want to make a deep run in the playoffs, you got to have some of these experienced names, these familiar names on the roster. And getting Tre'Davious White back, especially as well. These 2 games, maybe even one more game, you kind of see it as it's almost like a preseason action for him, with him being, get him just a little bit of action, sprinkle him in here and there. And then after, that second or third game, as you mentioned, you get him into full action like it's a regular season for him, and you go from there. So, certainly getting some of these names not only back from injury is helpful, but also getting these familiar names in the lineup is helpful as well. And it'll show probably within the last, 6-5 games of the season, and then hopefully into the postseason.
Now, I am speculating here, which is incredibly responsible of me, but with Tanner Gentry out of practice squad call-ups, with him now needing to be added to the active roster, I would have to think the Bills probably weren't ready to do that, which is, right. I would, again, presume that's why a guy like John Brown got called. So now at this point, John Brown has 2 more games to help integrate himself into the offense before the Bills have to make a decision on whether or not he's going to be called up to the active roster. I mean, it's a situation where they don't really have a wealth of players, as you mentioned, Brayton. Excuse me, I'm losing my freaking mind over here. That's a good evil Brayton name for you.
Ooh.
They don't have a lot of talent there, as you mentioned, but I mean, there's a potential that Odell Beckham Jr. could show up, which even if OBJ shows up, he's probably not going to play until week 17 or week 18, because again, the Bills have shown a penchant for slowly but surely bringing people in. And I'm not even sure if OBJ is going to sign in Buffalo. You hope he would, because it would be exciting and be a shot in the arm for the Buffalo Bills, but
right.
We'll see what happens there. But I think a guy like John Brown, they'll just continue to give him more and more opportunities. And then it's going to be a situation where they have to make a tough decision. Is he the guy that we need, or is he not? And they go from there. But we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but again, the Bills are driving once again. They had a 94-yard touchdown drive in the second half, which marks the team's 5th 90-plus yard touchdown drive this season, which, again, the Buffalo Bills, the last time they had 5 such touchdown drives in a season was 1991. I was a wee lad, and Brayton was not a lad at all at that time. So
well, I mean, it depends on when it was in 1991, because, you were born.
That's true. Same with me.
I was born at the end of the regular season-ish.
There you go. So, there you go. That's what I'm saying. Maybe you were. I don't know. I didn't go back into the research. That's my bad.
Sorry for the listeners who feel like you guys are just showing my age.
We were wee lads at the time. Both have gray and or no hair, or both, because I started to lose my hair too. So there you go. There you go. Anyways, Buffalo with 4,930 total yards of offense through 12 games. Buffalo established a new franchise record of total yards through 12 games. Their previous record was 4,859 yards, also in the fancy year of 1991. So with that being said, Brayton, we're going to go cry about our lack of hair, and we'll be back right after this quick commercial break with more Trust the Podcast here on the Gear Radio Network.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Back from commercial break here on Trust the Podcast. Brayton, our look ahead and our preview of next week's game, which will be a little fun because we're previewing the next week of football before this week of football is played. Who cares? We did what we want. It's our podcast. That's why we have a podcast. But injury news first off, as mentioned, Buffalo off till Monday. So don't really have many injury updates, but we'll just kind of go through what happened on Thursday. First off, linebacker Von Miller. Buffalo put a kibosh on Miller's plan of returning as soon as possible with the bigger picture in mind, which honestly is probably the right decision, because you know what? If Miller's going to come in and get hurt again, would you rather lose him in a playoff game, or would you rather lose him in a regular season game against the Bears or something like that? Right. Prior to Thursday's game, Miller was placed on the IR. This is important. It's kind of a tactical move, but it's important to put him on the IR before the game because that allows him to return week 17 at the Bengals. So you'll get a little bit of ramp up time. Would presume it's going to be very much like a Tre'Davious White situation. Get his feet wet, get him comfortable, and then let him loose when the time is right. Left tackle Deion Dawkins missed the game with an ankle injury. Last week he was a DNP. So Monday, Tuesday, and I think Wednesday was a DNP. As we've seen, that's a big loss for the Buffalo Bills offense, especially with David Quessenberry hurt as well, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But hopefully Deion Dawkins can get right soon because, again, the offense flows much better, obviously, but just it seems like Josh Allen, when he knows that Dawkins is over there on the left side, whether or not Dawkins is being effective, it just seems like Josh Allen's a different player. So that's a huge deal for the Buffalo Bills offense. Also, again, David Quessenberry came into the game with an ankle injury on the first drive of the game, Brayton. He re-aggravated that ankle injury. It did not look very comfortable for him on that drive or the rest of the game, really. He looked like if someone came at him quick or made a quick move, it was very much like you and I playing professional football. We would just be like, well, I got beat, so okay.
Right.
And it ended up leading to a lot of the pocket collapsing on and around Josh Allen, but he was able to make some plays, which was very good. But as Josh Allen does, but Quessenberry did leave the game in the third quarter due to that injury. And again, we don't have any update on that. The one thing, again, Brayton, injuries, you can't predict injuries, and they're always usually a fickle bitch. That's the best way to put it. Defensive tackle Jordan Phillips left the game and was ruled out with a shoulder injury. At Banged Up Bills on Twitter says their video shows a possible AC joint sprain and did note that Phillips was seen in the sling after the game. And if this doesn't piss you off, I don't know what does, Brayton, because Jordan Phillips was just having a good time chasing Mac Jones, who I don't know what the hell Mac Jones was doing. Just kind of running around. Yeah. Back and forth. And Jordan Phillips dove at his ankles and then didn't get back up. It looked like, it looked a little painful for Jordan Phillips. But as we've seen, Jordan Phillips, not a household name, maybe in Buffalo because, again, he loves Buffalo. Buffalo loves him. But Jordan Phillips has very much been like Shaq Lawson, where I believe Shaq Lawson said recently, I swear I read this somewhere. If not, if I'm making it up, by all means, feel free to @ me on Twitter. I probably won't respond anyways, but Shaq Lawson of his career was leaving Buffalo because it seems like the guys, we've talked about this so many times, Brayton, myself, John, even myself with Mr. Perez, the Buffalo Bills know how to scout guys and fit guys for their system.
Right.
Jordan Phillips is a guy like that. AJ Klein is a guy like that. Shaq Lawson is a guy like that, or if you put them somewhere else, maybe they're not so good. But when you get them here in Buffalo, they're not a star, but they are a very good, very big piece to the puzzle. And Jordan Phillips is one of the bigger pieces to the puzzle of the not household names of this Buffalo Bills defense. So an injury to Jordan Phillips, as we saw earlier this year with his hamstring, can play a very big role to filling up the middle of that defensive line.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jordan Phillips is, I'll always say that my Twitter account is the Jordan Phillips fan account. I will always support Jordan Phillips, even when he got into it with Josh Allen at at training camp. It was just kind of like, hey, I want to support Jordan Phillips here, and I'm still going to, but what are you doing? So, certainly not having him would be tough to swallow, just to, have to, and not that Daquan Jones or Tim Settle aren't a good replacement for Jordan Phillips, but when Jordan Phillips came back, as you mentioned, it just seemed like that, he got back to his style of game that he was playing at when he was first here. He started his career in Miami. It didn't necessarily work out there. Comes to Buffalo off waivers. Seemed like he found a niche with the Bills, and then, goes off to Arizona for 2 years and plays okay, but wasn't necessarily the same player he was in Buffalo. And then he comes back and he shows them almost right away, just like, hey, maybe this was the place I needed to be all along. Sort of the same thing as I mentioned before with Shaq Lawson. So, yeah, certainly the effect of potentially losing him would be hard. You hope Deion Dawkins gets back in time to be able to play against the Jets coming up here, just because obviously we saw what happened when, David Quessenberry needed to go against Josh Uche. And then, this upcoming week against the Jets, you've got, I'm blanking on the really good young rookie defensive end for the Jets that kind of was a factor against them the first game. I can't. Jermaine Johnson, I think, is his name. You can, but either way, the Jets' defensive line has really stepped up, and they can find a way to expose the Bills without Deion Dawkins and having a banged up David Questenberry out there. It's not going to be a good time for Josh Allen out there going forward next week. But certainly, you hope the Bills continue to get healthier, which they have been. But then you got a couple of other guys that get banged up here and there. So it's all about still just trying to find ways to get healthy and get back on the field and being a factor for the Bills going forward, especially with the playoffs inching closer and closer.
I just had like an acid trip moment here because I clicked on the Jets roster and it says that their starting quarterback is Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh.
That's no.
That's weird.
No.
Somebody's toying with
yeah, someone thinks they're cute here. So the Jets we'll talk about now, the Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. It is a week 14 matchup at Highmark Stadium. I forgot the name of the stadium for a second because it feels like it's been so goddamn long since the Bills have played there. It's been it'll be almost a month since the Bills have played at Highmark Stadium when they take the field Sunday, December 11th against the New York Jets at 1 p.m. on CBS. We did see that NBC wanted the game and CBS said, nah, we're keeping it. And now we get the Chargers and Dolphins, which is not a bad matchup. But speaking of bad matchups, the Jets take on the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday. And prior to their game with the Buffalo Bills, we're going to see more of Mike White, who in his first appearance this season, we've got 22 of 28, 78.6% completion percentage, 315 yards and 3 touchdowns. It really does seem like the Jets may have found their guy under center because this is not the first time he's done this. Last year in 2021, he was decent in 4 games. He had 953 passing yards, 66.7 completion percentage, which is relatively good. 5 touchdowns, 8 picks. The picks aren't great, but you gotta make plays you got to take chances to make plays, and sometimes it doesn't work out for you. But Mike White, Dallas Cowboys draft pick in 2018, is getting his shot because what's his face? Zach Wilson doesn't know how to accept blame and move on, I guess. It's interesting, but
there's a lot of interesting things about Zach Wilson.
Yeah, with it being a, what do we call this? A redemption game for the Buffalo Bills. I mean, I would have to think that they're going to find a way to win this game. I can't see the Bills losing to the Jets twice in a season. I mean, personally, I just find it hard to believe.
Yeah.
But Brayton, give me your prediction here for the game on Sunday.
Well, I mean, the last time that we podcasted, we podcasted together for that Jets game in the Meadowlands. And I remember when we were talking and doing our predictions then, I think you'd phrase the questions just like, do the Jets really have a chance? It's just like, they do, but like, obviously the Bills are quite better than they are. And it does continue to show that the Bills are still a much better team, I think, than most of the teams in the NFL. I think they're light years ahead of the Jets still. The Jets are better. Their defense is certainly better, but their offense, they still have questions at quarterback that they can't seem to answer. Yes, Mike White got a big win against the Bears the other day, but let's just remember, it's the Bears. Their defense is bad. Their offense is young. So, they go up against, who do they go up against? The Vikings this week. I mean, that'll be a better telling kind of tale as to what the Jets kind of have against the Vikings team that, the Vikings have been good this year. Maybe they're not as good as, some people have talked them up to be, but the Jets certainly, we'll see how they play against the Vikings. We'll see how Mike White fares. Does he have another game of brilliance in him, or is it going to be similar to what he did last year against the Bengals, where he threw for 400 yards, I think, if I remember correctly. And then the week after that, they played the Bills, and he threw 4 interceptions against the Bills, and that was it. So we'll see how that goes with Mike White. We'll see how it goes against the Vikings. But I certainly, yes, I'm in the same boat as you are. I can't see a way the Bills lose twice in the season against the Jets. I mean, if they did, that certainly would be disappointing. It would be, very
if
much.
If they do, you're not allowed on the podcast ever again when the Bills play the Jets.
Fair enough. Because
I heard you before the I did tell you before the show when you mentioned, the last time we were on the podcast together, the Bills played the Jets and the Bills lost, and I said, shut up. Shut up.
Okay, I'll shut up now.
I don't mean to be rude, but shut up, Brayton.
It's all good. It's all good.
So I do think the Bills are going to win. I mean, I would have to think we're probably going to get more of a Patriots type game where it's relatively close, but the Bills are going to I would have to presume they're going to try to control the clock, do as much as they possibly can to take the wind out of the other team's sails. I know John would probably want to say the Jets are going to win, but I'm going to do John's gimmick here real quick. And the ESPN matchup predictor, America has the Bills taking the Jets 80.5% of the time, or 80.5% of America, I apologize, has the Bills over the Jets. The Jets are at 19.3%, but the 0.2% of America that voted, according to ESPN Analytics, said the game was going to end in a tie, which would be it'd be awful. That would be awful.
Oh, no, ties are wonderful.
Not the Bills and the Jets. I would probably drive my car backwards into oncoming traffic if that happens,
Not the Bills and the Jets. I mean, obviously, I don't like.
If you're going to tie anybody, you can't tie against a team that you already lost to this year, especially when they're in your division.
Yeah, exactly. Don't tie
because then you lose any sort of tiebreaker at that point in time.
Right.
And you don't want that.
If they tie at all, I'll root for a tie maybe in like the Bears game or something like that. Christmas Eve, a tie against the Bears. Who cares?
You better watch your mouth. You're treading on thin ice there, bucko.
But listen, I'm all for ties. I'm all for ties. In this house, we root for ties.
Well, hey, Brayton, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast here. Brayton is at BJ Wilson, or Brayton J. Wilson. I almost said the old one. Brayton J. Wilson.
Yep.
I am at Wolfe BLTD. Make sure you all send out a tweet to John on Monday. He is at I am JC Money. Will he respond? I don't know, because he does what he wants. Happy 21st birthday, John. And we'll see you next week. But again, Brayton, thanks for tuning in. As always, we are Trust the Podcast.
Oh, and you're not.
We will see you same time, same place next week. And as always, go Bills.
Go Bills.
The preceding presentation has been brought to you by the Gear Network.